Hi, welcome to Muqaddimah. My name is Siavish. The Gaza Strip has been largely destroyed by Israeli bombing since October 2023. More than 1 million people are displaced. Israel has been conducting indiscriminate bombing of the entire strip. As of the recording of this video, most of the Palestinian people in Gaza have been pushed to Rafah, the last little town at the Egyptian border. Israeli forces are now also threatening the Palestinian refugees there. They've already blockaded humanitarian aid from getting there. The United States, true to form, has vetoed multiple resolutions for ceasefire in the United Nations. The Gazan people have nowhere to go anymore. Gaza has been ravaged. Israel's bombing has destroyed apartments, schools, hospitals, and buildings of historical importance. So, to try to keep some of Gaza's history alive, I wanted to make a video about the history of the city and some of its stories. This video is the first half of that. This video is brought to you by, well, you guys. Thanks to my patrons for supporting the channel and making these videos possible. Al-Muqaddimah is funded only by Patreon, and as you can see, the videos take a long time to research, edit, and produce. And it's only because of my patrons that I am able to put this kind of time into these videos and keep them free from any kind of paywall. So if you want to pledge $1 or more to support the channel, you can head over to my Patreon. Link is in the description. You can also become a member right here on YouTube. There's some cool stuff that comes with it. Back to the video. The Gaza Valley lies on the crossroads between Egypt, Palestine, Syria, and Arabia. In addition to that, it's on the Mediterranean Sea. Its gifted geography made it a big destination for commerce in the past. However, whenever Syria and Egypt went to war, Gaza was usually caught in the crossfire, as it was essential for an invading army marching in either direction to control it. However, when it was peaceful, it was quite a prosperous city thanks to commerce. Its wealth gave it the resources to maintain a very active intellectual life and made it a center of learning. Before the arrival of Islam, Gaza was home to many Christian scholars and a huge library that made it comparable to cities like Alexandria, although not as big. The late 5th century scholar Aeneas of Gaza called it the Athens of Asia. On the eve of the rise of Islam, Gaza was part of the Byzantine or Eastern Roman Empire, along with the rest of Palestine, Syria, and Egypt. It was a thoroughly Christian city, but it was also a cosmopolitan city, so people from all kinds of backgrounds could be found there. Among the merchants who traveled to Gaza were Arabs from places such as Petra, Yemen, and the rest of the Arabian Peninsula. One of those Arab merchants was Hashim ibn Abd Manaf. Hashim came from the city of Mecca in Western Arabia, from a region known as Hijaz. But during one of his trading missions, he passed away and was buried in the city of Gaza. This was in the first decades of the 6th century. The date is very murky. Hashim ibn Abd Manaf had a great-grandson named Muhammad ibn Abdullah, who received revelation from the God of Abraham, became a prophet, and founded a new religion, the religion of Islam. Now, Prophet Muhammad was born in or around 571 CE. He received the revelation of the Quran in 610, and after around 22 or 23 years, he passed away around 632 CE. By the time of his death, his new community of Muslims controlled most of the Arabian Peninsula, parts of it directly and parts of it through alliances. To the north, the Greek Byzantine and the Persian Sassanid empires were fighting for dominance over the Middle East for centuries. Their latest war went from 602 CE to 628 CE. That's quite a while, and in that time period, Gaza changed hands, as did much of the Middle East. The Persians went as far as Egypt and even Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire. However, under the brilliant Emperor Heraclius, the Persians were pushed back and the Byzantines were able to regain their territory in Syria, Palestine, and Egypt. Heraclius similarly broke the Persians and attacked the Persian heartland, almost reaching their capital. So by 628, when the war ended, these two empires were exhausted and their coffers were empty. Their men had died in the thousands. Their cities had been sacked, some of them multiple times over. Because of this, they weren't able to respond to the threat that was brewing south in the Arabian Peninsula. In 632, when Prophet Muhammad passed away, his successor as the leader of the Muslim community was a man named Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr and his successor, Umar ibn al-Khattab, put together an army and began to raid the Byzantines and the Sassanids. Eventually, these raids became a full-fledged invasion. Neither the Byzantines nor the Sassanids had the proper resources to push back the Arab Muslims, who had a renewed vigor because of their sense of unity under a single religion. Now, one of these raids happened in February 634, a few kilometers from the city of Gaza. The Byzantine defenders of Gaza were defeated there, but the Muslims did not press forward to take the city. We know this because of a document written by Thomas the Presbyter in 640, only around 8 years after the death of the Prophet. Anyhow, before Umar's death in 644, the Arabs had conquered Egypt, Palestine, Syria, Iraq, and had even broken into Persia, where the Sassanid Empire collapsed. The Byzantine Empire, however, did not collapse because Anatolia was too difficult for Muslims to penetrate. Gaza was conquered in 637 along with the rest of Palestine, including Jerusalem. Gaza's defenders were killed, but its population was spared. Gaza was treated quite well by the conquerors. Its central church, the Church of Saint Eudoxia, was converted into a mosque, but a nearby church was allowed to remain open for Christians. It should be kept in mind that the location was actually home to a temple of Zeus before the church was built, which was converted to a mosque. That central mosque was later renamed to Al-Umari Mosque, named after Caliph Umar. That mosque was Gaza's oldest mosque until the Israelis reduced it to rubble in December 2023. The people of Gaza seem to have converted to Islam quite early, and the city went back to normal soon after its conquest. However, the people in the countryside took longer to embrace Islam, since there's quite a bit of evidence that tells us that wine was being produced there, and wine production was only allowed for non-Muslims in the caliphate. After that, Gaza seems to be quite a prosperous city as it became an intellectual and commercial center once again. In 767, a man named Muhammad ibn Idris was born here, who would eventually be known as Imam al-Shafi'i, the founder of the al-Shafi'i school of Islamic jurisprudence. Apparently, his daughter's grave was still in the city in 2014, but I'm not sure what became of it following the Israeli bombing of Gaza during its commitment to the genocide of the Palestinian people in 2023 and after. During the 8th, 9th, and 10th centuries, Gaza was said to be a remarkable city. One author called it Syria's bride, while another remarked on how incredibly beautiful the city was. It was also quite a big city, second only in Palestine to the city of Ramla, which was the capital of the Palestine province. However, in the final decades of the 10th century, the city gained a new importance. You see, in 969, Egypt was conquered by the Fatimid Caliphate, which had come from modern-day Tunisia. The Fatimid Caliphate was Shia, while the Abbasid Caliphate, which was centered on Baghdad in Iraq, was Sunni. So there was an intense rivalry between these two caliphates. The Fatimids moved to take Palestine, and the Abbasids were unable to push them back, so Palestine, including Jerusalem and Gaza, fell to the Fatimids. However, it was all but peaceful, as there was a constant effort by the Abbasids to take Palestine. For the next century, the two caliphates fought for control in the region and ended up disrupting the flow of merchants and pilgrims to Jerusalem. Jerusalem, as you probably know, is a holy site for Muslims, Christians, and Jews, and so it received pilgrims from all over Asia, Europe, and Africa. This disruption was used as a reason by Pope Urban II to call for a crusade in 1095 to retake Jerusalem and establish a Christian kingdom in the, by now, thoroughly Muslim Middle East. The crusading army that marched from Europe to Jerusalem besieged and took the holy city in 1099. The Crusaders massacred the population and forced the Egyptian Fatimid defenders of the region to fall back. Neighboring cities were conquered as well, and much of Palestine was christened as the Kingdom of Jerusalem. Gaza was taken without conflict because it seems that the population had left and gone to Egypt. The Al-Umari Mosque was converted into a church once more. Gaza became quite important because the Egyptians and the Crusaders were still fighting in some places. One of those places was the city of Ascalon. The First Crusade had ended with the Battle of Ascalon, which the Fatimids lost. However, despite this, the Crusaders couldn't take Ascalon and it remained in Muslim hands for the next 5 decades. Since it is right on the coast, it was supplied by the Egyptians through sea and was used to harass the Crusaders with raids. Gaza and Ascalon are some 20 kilometers apart, so Gaza was used as a means to keep the Fatimids at Ascalon in check. A Crusader fort was built some 20 kilometers south of Gaza, where the present-day city of Deir al-Balah sits today, to protect Gaza from the Egyptians. By 1149, Gaza was handed over to the Knights Templars, so they could harass Ascalon and push back any raiding forces from there. They even built a fortress between Gaza and Ascalon. Not only that, it seems that it was the Knights Templars who expanded the church that had replaced the Umari Mosque. They rededicated it to St. John the Baptist. The Crusaders were finally able to take Ascalon in 1153, which once again put Gaza in the background as Ascalon served as the main stronghold on the road between Palestine and Egypt. Now, Gaza, however, still remained a decent city. The Arab geographer al-Idrisi, who lived in Sicily, tells us that Gaza was a modest city, but its markets were still famous around the Mediterranean Sea. The Second Crusade, which went from 1147 to 1150, was a turning point in the struggle between the Crusaders and the Muslims. The Fatimids had declined in power by a lot, and much of Greater Syria now rested in the hands of the Zengids. The Crusader kingdom of Jerusalem was surrounded by Zengid lands. One of their generals, named Salahudin Ayyubi, also took over Egypt as the vizier of the Fatimids. He was the Sunni vizier of the Shia Fatimids, who was actually a general of the Zengids, who in turn claimed to be ruling on the behalf of the Sunni caliph. It's a bit complicated. Salahudin was young. He had an army and was full of resolve. Along with that, he had one dream: to push the Crusaders into the sea and end their kingdom at Jerusalem. This wouldn't be the easiest of goals because the Crusaders were quite strong and Salahudin only shared the tiny Egyptian border with them. Despite this, in 1170, Salahudin went on the offensive and took a fort merely 20 kilometers from Gaza. From 1170 to 1187, Salahudin worked on uniting Egypt and Syria under his control. After the Fatimid Caliph died in 1174, Salahudin declared the end of the Fatimid Caliphate and made himself Sultan of Egypt. After the death of his mentor and superior, Nuruddin Zengi, Salahudin joined the struggle for power and came out on top. By 1187, Salahudin's territory surrounded the Christian kingdom of Jerusalem. It was then that Salahudin met the Franks in the Battle of Hattin and annihilated them. After that, he moved on Jerusalem, which he took as well, sparking the Third Crusade. Now, during the Third Crusade, the King of England, Richard the Lionheart, wanted to take Ascalon to strengthen his position before taking Jerusalem, and so he did what everyone before him had done. He took Gaza first. However, Salahudin fought back, and during a peace negotiation, he asked for the fortifications around Ascalon and Gaza to be destroyed so they wouldn't serve as strongholds for the Crusaders. Hence, the walls were destroyed and never rebuilt. 2 centuries later, when Ibn Battuta visited the city of Gaza, he mentioned that the city had no walls as well. The Third Crusade failed in its objective of taking Jerusalem. What they couldn't do with swords, however, would be done by the might of diplomacy just a few decades later. The dynasty established by Salahuddin Ayyubi ran into struggles for power between the princes. In addition to that, the struggle against the Christian Franks continued. After the Sixth Crusade, the Ayyubid Sultan Al-Kamil gave Jerusalem and some areas around it to the Kingdom of Jerusalem under the Treaty of Jaffa. Basically, Al-Kamil and his brothers had been contesting for the throne of Egypt, and when the Sixth Crusade arrived in Palestine, Al-Kamil decided to negotiate to protect Egypt and Syria. As a result, Jerusalem once again ended up in the hands of Christians, less than 50 years after Salahudin had conquered it. By 1244, the city was once again target of Muslim ambition. Gaza was taken in that year by the Muslims as well, who then marched on Jerusalem, which was also taken in 1244. It was around this time that the Mongols entered the scene. They had swept across Muslim Central Asia, Persia, Iraq, Syria, and Anatolia. They seemed to be an unstoppable force when they sacked Baghdad in 1258. Baghdad was home of the Sunni Caliphate and the symbolic heartland of the Islamic world. However, it would be the land of Palestine that would mark the beginning of the end for the Mongols. The Mongols had taken Gaza in 1260. The next stop would have been Egypt for them. But their general, the famous Hulagu Khan, had to leave his army behind to go to Mongolia to deal with a succession crisis there. The Egyptians were able to take Gaza back in the same year and went on the offensive. They defeated the Mongols at Ain Jalut, north of Jerusalem. This was the first major defeat for the Mongols and marked the extent of their conquest. The Egyptian army that defeated them wasn't of the Ayyubid dynasty, however, but of their slave soldiers, the Mamluks, who had taken over as sultans. Since the days of the Shia-Sunni rivalry of the Seljuks and the Fatimids, Gaza had been involved in the struggle of power between northeastern edge of Africa, that is Egypt, and southwestern edge of Asia, that is Syria. Now, finally, Gaza was at peace once more. The Mamluks held Gaza as the meeting point of their empire, since their empire stretched between Egypt and Syria. Hence, they brought a lot of prosperity to the city. They rebuilt the Al-Umari Mosque and made improvements to many structures around the city. The Al-Umari Mosque that existed before the Israelis destroyed it dates back to this period. In fact, the neighborhood of Gaza known as Shujaiya held many buildings from Mamluk period. However, the name Shujaiya itself comes from the Ayyubids after an Ayyubid general named Shajar-ud-Din al-Qurdi who died in battle against the Crusaders near Gaza in 1239. Interestingly, the street that marks the boundary of the area is named after Salahudin. In 1348, the Black Death hit Gaza, and according to one author, 22,000 people died. Ibn Battuta, the famous traveler, visited the city for a third time that year and mentioned that the city was deserted and around 1,000 people died there every day. However, after the Black Death died out, the Mamluks stimulated the local economy by building a new Karvansaray between Gaza and Rafah. Karvansaray is a place for travelers to stay, rest, resupply, etc. It also served as a postal relay. It was inaugurated by Emir Yunus al-Novruzi, who was an official of the Mamluks. The Karvansaray took his name and later came to be known as Khan Yunus. Slowly, Khan Yunus became a city. Before Israel's incessant bombing of the Palestinians, Khan Yunus was the second largest urban area in the Gaza Strip, behind the city of Gaza itself. Gaza was struck again with a plague in 1438, but again, the Mamluks revitalized the local economy soon after. However, Gaza would fall once again, this time to Muslim hands. The Ottoman Empire had been on the rise in the 14th and 15th centuries. They had captured Constantinople in 1453 and proven themselves as a formidable empire. In 1514, Sultan Selim I fought the Persian Sassanid Empire and defeated them. Then he moved against Syria and defeated the Mamluks there in 1516, opening the road to Egypt. That road, by the way, was known as Sultan's Road under the Muslims, but under the ancient Egyptians, it was known as Horus Road. Anyhow, Selim captured Palestine, including Jerusalem and Gaza. He then left a small garrison in Gaza and marched on Cairo. However, there was apparently a rumor in Gaza that Selim was defeated in Egypt and the people of Gaza revolted and attacked the garrison. In retribution of that, Selim massacred the population of Gaza. This marked a decline in Gaza's fortune. You see, Gaza's importance came from it being the crossroads of Syria, Western Arabia, the Red Sea, and Egypt. However, the Ottomans, who ruled from Istanbul or Constantinople, would directly exercise control over both Syria and Egypt through the Mediterranean Sea. There was no need for them to go through Gaza anymore. Similarly, in 1498, as Vasco da Gama landed in India, the trade route that went through the Muslim Middle East from China and India to Europe dried up, as the trade route now went around the southern tip of the African continent. There was still some trade between Egypt and Syria, but not as much as it used to be. During the Ottoman era, a local dynasty known as the Radwan Pasha family held Gaza as Ottoman governors and sought to elevate its importance, but they weren't very successful. In any case, the Ottoman period was largely peaceful and dull for Gaza, but Ottoman power in the region was about to take a major hit as a French general landed in Egypt in 1798. That general was named Napoleon Bonaparte. Bonaparte's arrival in Egypt started an era of Western influence on Egypt, Palestine, and Syria. It is this influence that wreaked havoc over the Middle East and has culminated in the State of Israel and its current genocide against the Palestinian people. We'll talk about that in the next video. See you next time. Don't forget to subscribe and press the bell icon. On the screen right now, you can see the names and tiers of the patrons. You can join them by pledging $1 or more to support the channel. Thank you for watching.